Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're going through some excerpts from Al Pacino's autobiography. This is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, this should be fun. Lots to unpack here.
We've got quite the stack of pages here. I'm thinking for this deep dive, we should try to uncover the man behind all those legendary roles, like the real Al Pacino.
Exactly. Beyond just Michael Corleone and Tony Montana.
Right. So beyond the characters.
More than just the guy we see on screen.
Yeah. So one thing that really struck me right away was how he described his early fame, especially after that play, The Indian Wants the Bronx. He talks about this feeling of disorientation, almost like he became a stranger to himself.
Yeah, I noticed that too. He even said something about seeing his face in newspapers and not recognizing the person looking back.
Right. It's wild. And what's interesting is that he contrasts this experience with how fame is perceived today.
Oh, absolutely. Like back then, it wasn't this universally sought after thing,
Right.
It was different, more like an intrusion, maybe even like a burden for some people.
Yeah. And it's not like he just passively accepted it either. He actually talks about actively distancing himself from The Godfather.
Really?
Even with all the success it brought him.
That's interesting.
It's almost like he put up this wall between himself and that role.
I wonder why. Was it just a way to cope with all that attention? Or was there something more to it?
Maybe he felt like Coppola's influence was so strong that he got overshadowed a bit.
Maybe. It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But then there's that crazy story about him turning down Han Solo in Star Wars. Can you imagine?
Wow. Just think about that for a second.
I know, right?
It really makes you think about his priorities back then.
Totally. He was on the verge of superstardom, but he chose to stick with theater.
Yeah, it seems like it wasn't just about avoiding a certain type of fame. He wanted to stay true to his artistic roots.
I see what you mean. So it was more than just a career move. It was about staying grounded.
Exactly. He actually talks about this yearning for a simpler life, focused on his craft and his family.
It's like he wanted that normalcy, even with all the craziness of Hollywood.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That desire to hold on to something real, it comes up a lot throughout the book.
Definitely. And this yearning for authenticity really stands out when you consider his connection to Richard III. That wasn't just another role for him.
Oh, definitely not. That character was something else entirely.
He kept coming back to it.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
From his actor's studio days to that incredible production in Boston's Church of the Covenant.
I know. And then, of course, there was that Broadway revival.
Right. Which didn't go as well.
It makes you think, what was it about Richard III that captivated him so much?
That's the big question, right? I mean, why this Shakespearean villain? What was so appealing about that character?
Yeah, why him? I can only imagine what it was like seeing him perform those lines in that massive church.
Oh, I bet it was electric. That setting was perfect for Richard III.
Totally. Those towering ceilings,
Yeah.
the stained glass windows.
It all adds to the drama.
For sure. The church itself became a part of the performance.
Absolutely. It brought a whole other level of power and intrigue to the play.
You really see how the environment can elevate art.
Yeah, it's a great example of that.
Yeah.
And then when you compare that success to what happened on Broadway,
The critics and everything.
yeah, it's a pretty stark contrast.
He even tells that funny story about bumping into Jackie Kennedy Onassis after one of the shows.
Oh, yeah, that one's great. Or he offers his hand to be kissed.
I know, right? It makes you wonder if he was still partially in character or something.
Maybe. It's like that intense focus he brings to his roles.
Yeah, he gets so immersed.
It's as if that intensity spills over into his real life sometimes.
Totally. And that actually leads us to another interesting part of his story. His whole relationship with Hollywood. Remember that rumor about him boycotting the Oscars?
Oh, yeah, the one where he was supposedly snubbed for his supporting role in The Godfather.
Right. And he only found out about it recently.
That's crazy. It was like this Hollywood myth that followed him for years.
It just goes to show you how easily things can get twisted.
Especially in an industry that's all about image and perception.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder what other misconceptions are out there about celebrities.
And the crazy thing is that Pacino never intended to boycott anything.
He was just anxious about the whole Hollywood scene.
It's like he never felt comfortable in that world.
You can sense that he always wanted something more genuine.
Totally. And that brings us to Serpico, which, really cemented his place in film history.
But what's interesting is that he wasn't initially drawn to the role. It wasn't the script that hooked him.
No, it was Frank Serpico himself.
That encounter changed everything for him.
Yeah, meeting the man behind the story.
He was captivated by his integrity,
His commitment to justice.
especially in the face of all that corruption he faced.
And then there's that story about the question he asked Serpico. The one about why he didn't just take the bribes and donate the money if it bothered him so much.
Oh, yeah, that one was powerful.
And Serpico's response, if I did that, who would I be when I listened to Beethoven?
Wow.
That answer. It just unlocks something for Pacino.
It revealed the core of Serpico's character.
It wasn't just about ethics. It was about his sense of self.
It's amazing how that one question about Beethoven suddenly illuminated who Serpico was at his core.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the thing is, even with this profound connection, the making of Serpico wasn't a walk in the park.
Right.
He talks about all this behind-the-scenes drama.
Like what?
Director changes and just the general chaos of filmmaking.
Oh, right, right.
There's even a story about him accidentally impersonating Serpico while they were filming.
Wait, what? What do you mean?
He was in costume, and he pulled over a truck driver using his Serpico badge and everything.
He gave him a ticket.
Well, he scolded him for polluting the air.
Are you serious? I wonder if the driver even recognized him.
I don't know. That's the funny part. It's like those lines between the role and reality got completely blurred.
That is too funny. He was so immersed in the character.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's that story about the first screening of Serpico.
Oh, here we go.
This is classic Pacino.
I can't wait to hear this.
Let's just say he showed up to his own movie premiere a little worse for wear.
Was he,
Let's just say he wasn't exactly sober.
And he wasn't alone, was he?
No, he brought a date, a woman he'd just met at a bar earlier that night.
He took a complete stranger to his movie premiere.
That's Pacino for you. Always unpredictable.
Oh, man. I'm dying to know what happened next.
We'll get to that in part 2.
Okay, but before we go, I'm curious about something.
Sure, what's that?
All this dedication to his craft, did it affect his personal life,
Oh, absolutely. He actually talks about a lot of his relationships ending because of his focus on work.
That's tough. It makes you wonder if you can really separate those two parts of your life.
Yeah, can you truly compartmentalize your passion and your relationships? Or do they always end up mixing?
Right. It's something a lot of people struggle with, I think.
Yeah, sure. It's a universal dilemma.
Stay tuned, everybody. When we come back, we've got Oscar night jitters, a near disastrous hair situation, and a hilarious encounter with Jeff Bridges.
This is going to be good. So that premiere was wild. But let's move on to a really important moment. The 1974 Oscars Serpico got him another nomination. And there was no avoiding the Hollywood spotlight this time.
Yeah, no escaping
I
that.
had to face it head on. And knowing how he felt about those things,
All that anxiety.
you'd think he would have had some kind of game plan.
Right. At least a strategy.
But this is Pacino we're talking about. He decides to try out a new hairstyle right before the ceremony.
Oh, this can't be good.
Fresh out of the shower.
Yeah.
He tries to do the wet look.
Yeah.
And, well, Marty Bregman was not happy,
Who's Marty Bregman?
his manager. And a close friend, Pacino, describes him yelling, "You fucking idiot," which was rare for Bregman.
Wow, he must have been freaking out.
He was desperately trying to blow dry Pacino's hair before they had to leave for the ceremony.
Okay, so we've got a stressed out Pacino, a panicking Bregman, and a blow dryer in a hotel room.
It's a pretty funny image.
I can only imagine. So did Bregman manage to fix it? What did he end up looking like?
Well, as his hair dried, it kind of puffed up, like a giant souffle. Pacino even jokes that his friends back in New York said his hair was the only part of him they could see on TV.
He had a hair helmet at the Oscars? That's amazing.
Right. But even with all the humor, you can sense the anxiety he was feeling.
Yeah, all that pressure.
He talks about this feeling of not belonging in that Hollywood environment,
Like he was putting on a brave face, but inside he was falling apart.
It's like that facade a lot of celebrities have.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how many of them feel that way.
Totally. And it gets worse. When he arrives at the ceremony, everyone just stares at him in silence.
Yeah, he talks about Jack Valenti,
Yeah.
head of the Motion Picture Association, giving him this shocked look.
Was it the hair?
Maybe partly, but it was also because of that boycott rumor. It finally hit him that people actually believed it,
Oh, wow.
that he was this arrogant actor who didn't respect the industry.
It's crazy how that rumor had taken on a life of its own.
Yeah, and it really affected how people saw him. No wonder he felt so out of place.
It's like he was surrounded by people who had completely misjudged him. And then there's the Jeff Bridges story.
Oh, yeah, this one's great. So Pacino's getting more and more anxious,
And probably more intoxicated, too.
Right. He looks at his watch and realizes how long the ceremony's been going on.
Floating close to the end.
And they haven't even announced the Best Actor award yet. He's nominated,
Right.
So he turns to Jeff Bridges, who's sitting next to him, and says, "The hour is almost up. I guess they're not going to get to Best Actor."
Wait, did he think the whole Oscars was only an hour long?
Apparently. And Bridges, being Bridges, just calmly replies, "It's 3 hours long, man.
And
3 hours long.
that is hilarious. Pacino totally misjudged the situation.
Yeah, he was in his own world, and Bridges just rolls with it. It's a classic Pacino moment.
Ooply, but it doesn't end there.
Right. He's convinced he's not going to win.
Really?
So much so that he didn't even prepare a speech.
That's a bold move.
Yeah. He's feeling trapped and anxious. And now he has to deal with the possibility of actually winning.
That's a whole other level of stress.
He describes this feeling of panic fueled by the Valium and his fear of public speaking.
I can relate to that.
He even jokes about the Academy being vengeful, giving him the award just to torture him.
It's like that fear of success being thrust into the spotlight when you're not ready.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the funny part. He doesn't win. Jack Lemmon wins Best Actor for Save the Tiger.
All that anxiety for nothing.
But here's the twist Pacino describes, feeling this immense relief when Lemmon's name is announced.
Like a weight lifted off his shoulders.
Exactly. It's like he dodged a bullet. And that moment of relief, it really humanizes him.
Yeah.
You know?
He's not this untouchable icon.
He's just a guy battling his own demons like everyone else.
And that's what makes his story so interesting. But there's still more to come, right?
Yeah, we've only scratched the surface. His journey is far from over. We've seen him navigate early fame, deal with Hollywood, and stumble through the Oscars. Now we're going to dive into his artistic evolution.
His process and the roles that defined his legacy.
That's next. Stay tuned for part 3.
So we've seen Al Pacino navigate early fame and grapple with Hollywood and those crazy Oscars. Now I'm curious about how his craft evolved, What did he learn along the way?
Yeah. The excerpts you picked really show how dedicated he was to acting.
It wasn't just about getting roles. He wanted to understand the characters, like really get inside their heads.
Exactly. He was always searching for that authenticity, those moments that connect with the audience.
You can really feel that when you watch his movies.
He talks about this idea of immersing himself in the character, like going beyond the script to create a real person.
We saw that with Serpico, right?
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
But it's not just that one role. He did it throughout his whole career.
Do you have a favorite? Like a role where you can really see his process shine through?
Dog Day Afternoon is a great one. His portrayal of Sonny Boy is incredible.
That bank robber.
Yeah. On the surface, he's just a desperate criminal.
Yeah.
But Pacino finds those layers of vulnerability.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
He makes him relatable, even sympathetic in a way.
He even improvised some of the most famous lines, like Attica. Attica.
Exactly. He was willing to take risks.
Yeah.
To go beyond the script, to find those moments of truth.
That's fascinating. But it wasn't always easy, was it? He talks about how his dedication affected his personal life.
Yeah. He admits that a lot of his relationships ended because of his work.
It's like he couldn't fully commit to a relationship without sacrificing a part of himself.
It's a tough dilemma. Can you really separate your passion from your personal life?
It's something a lot of creative people struggle with, I think.
For sure. Trying to find that balance between your art and the people you love.
It's really honest of him to talk about that. It makes him seem more human,
Absolutely. He's not just this larger-than-life legend. He's a real person dealing with real challenges.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Al Pacino, what would you say are the key takeaways?
Well, I think we've gotten a much better understanding of who he is, beyond just the roles he's played.
We saw his vulnerabilities, his struggles with fame and self-doubt.
But also his incredible passion and talent.
And that search for authenticity in a world that often feels fake.
We laughed with him, cringed at some of his stories.
But ultimately, I think we were inspired by his journey.
He reminds us that there's a human story behind every icon.
A story with both triumphs and failures.
With moments of brilliance and moments of chaos.
And in his case, it's a story that's still being written.
It makes you think about the choices we make in life.
And the sacrifices we're willing to make to pursue our dreams.
Al Pacino's story is a reminder that the journey is just as important as the destination.
And that the most compelling stories are the ones that reveal our humanity.
So what choices will you make? What's your story going to be? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Al Pacino.